Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Sayfie here with Chris Balas and Anthony Broome on a beautiful Thursday here in Michigan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to hit on some Michigan basketball transfer portal pursuits, some of the top targets. Hunter Dickinson has 2 upcoming visits. Also, Michigan remaining in the mix there. We will talk about that, the possibility that he could return to a Michigan roster that looks a heck of a lot better than it did a few weeks ago. And then I do want to mention an insane feat that a few Michigan athletes accomplished during the winter sports season at the end. We'll give them a shout out. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel as we climb towards, I believe, 22,000 AB subscribers on YouTube. So going strong there. And join us at thewolverine.com. $29.99 gets you premium access all the way until August 31st, right up until football season. So join us right now. We are brought to you by My Perfect Franchise. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Are you looking for a side hustle while working your current job? Are you wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Well, Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership. Andy Luedecke is the guy to hit up over at www.myperfectfranchise.net. You can phone him, 404-973-9901. I can't believe I just said phone him. That sounds like an old person. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net is his email. You can book a time with him on his calendar. That's on the website as well. The people watching on YouTube see the site there. So thank you to Andy for sponsoring us, and make sure to get that 100% free franchise consultation. Let's start with the transfer portal. As everyone knows, and it's one of the hottest topics amongst fans is, well, how are we at the scholarship limit? How are we still recruiting players? It just kind of works itself out, as we've talked about quite a bit throughout this offseason, because the numbers don't always add up at the time, but all that matters is really at the end. And at the same time, there are still kind of ways around it, it feels like. Michigan has Caleb Love, Namari Burnett, and Trey Jackson out of the transfer portal. But they're still active with a number of different guys. It seems like they want to wing, maybe another power forward, and then they're still looking at guys that could potentially, fill maybe a backup role behind Terrace Reed, or even a starter role at the center spot. Have Terrace Reed back him up. There's obviously some rumors out there about, is Papa Conte going to end up in the class, that sort of thing. So you still want some front court depth there. I do want to ask you guys this before we get into maybe some of the names. What would be the biggest need for you right now? If you're Juwan Howard and you're sitting there, we can only get one guy, or the first guy they go and get, would it be a wing, like a 3 type, a power forward, or a center to maybe add some depth along with Terrace Reed?
I'm power forward all the way. I think I need a shooting 4, right? Somebody who can shoot. Now, will Trey Jackson be that guy? I don't know. He didn't start at Seton Hall, and again, they brought their own people with them. The new coach, who's the new coach at Seton Hall this year?
Shaheen Holloway.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Brought his 4 from St. Pete's. So, but I got to tell you, to me, that's been the hole in the roster here for a while now. They need that guy. They need somebody there that can shoot the ball and open up the floor. Ideally, Hunter Dickinson is your 5 next year. We'll see if that happens. With the money that's going to be thrown at him from Kansas, let's be honest, fellas. I don't think anybody is going to be able to match what Kansas throws out there if they want him, and they do. Speaking to sources in Kansas, they want him badly. So if it's about money, then he's going to end up at Kansas. Maryland's in the mix, but to me, that's where it starts. So I think Namari Burnett was an underrated addition on this team. I think he's going to flourish here. I think he's going to not be looking over his shoulder, and he's going to understand that he's going to be able to play. I think he's a better shooter than he's shown, and he's committed to defense and a great kid. So to me, that was really a huge addition. So now, you know what? We'll see if they can find one more. They need another shooter, and to me, that's the position where they need it. You're mute.
Oh, I think you're muted, AB.
Try that again.
There we go. We got him.
Such in a row.
I don't. Yeah, I had some kind of flub last week too. Whatever it is, I'm not on my game today. I think that offense in any capacity, I think is to me still the biggest need. I don't care what position it comes from. If it comes in the form of Hunter Dickinson coming back, if it comes in the form of a Harrison Ingram or a Matthew Cleveland, that's fine too. Whatever it is, I think they do need someone who, maybe, we know that Caleb Love is probably going to be their lead dog when it comes to scoring and shot attempts and opportunities and things like that. But they need someone who could space the floor and fill it up a little bit. And ideally, if it's a wing, kind of get after it on defense too. I think Michigan's probably, when you look at building an identity for next season, when you look at the guys they brought in and the guys that are already on the roster, I think you're probably a little bit closer to being a little grittier defensively than you are this efficient offensive machine like they were when they went to the Elite Eight a few years ago. So that in any capacity would be a priority to me. I still think they're in a mode where, you can't get bogged down by, this guy could start for us. If you have someone that's in the portal that is a day one starter for you and he's interested and you can make it happen, you either mend fences or you give someone a firm handshake and, be on their way at this point. I think that this past year was too alarming for them to not have a sense of urgency in adding as much talent to this roster as they possibly have, or as they possibly can. And we keep seeing them in on guys, even with them at the scholarship limit right now. There could be things that happen still, other shoes to drop. You don't speculate on that because out of respect for the guys that are already on the roster. But, like last year, Michigan brings in a transfer guard and Jalen Llewellyn, and it scares Frankie Collins off. Things like that could always happen depending on who you bring in. So it's far from set. There's still, it feels like it was almost into June last year before we knew what this roster would look like heading into, this past season. So a lot of work to still go here. I think we'll probably get a Hunter Dickinson decision fairly soon. He's going to take a few visits. He's kept it quiet, which is unlike him, but I think it's probably a good move on his part. So we'll see what happens. I'm not buying not that there's a ton of hype on him returning. I think it's possible. I'm not quite buying that that's a legitimate option given the fact that there are some legitimate blue blood basketball schools that are willing to throw whatever it takes them to make it happen. I don't know if Michigan basketball can compete with that, but I like the options that are still in the portal. And even with what they already have, I think there's a path to them being competitive next year.
I will say that there are some boosters as part of the NIL collectives in Ann Arbor that are very basketball oriented. Some people that have their names on some things that would love to see it happen, that are I think a little more involved than we thought they were. So I think that's why there's some hope there. But I'm with you, Anthony. The thing is, though, you never know with this guy. You just don't know. And watching his Roundball podcast the other day, it's like, nobody knows. And listening to Phil Martelli and those guys talk, Michigan's assistant coach, like anybody who says that they understand and know what he's thinking is lying, because I'm not sure Hunter Dickinson knows yet, frankly. And he said that. I don't know where I'm going yet. So he did say he's taking those trips, fellas, because he's going home anyway, might as well go see Maryland and Georgetown. I'd be stunned if he didn't see Kansas, frankly, before he announced where he was going. And there are rumblings out there. I think Ant Wright posted or said in his spaces on Twitter that he is going to give Michigan the last shot. So let's see what they come up with, and maybe it's enough. But man, he's a guy that has to maximize his earning potential right now, because he's not going to be an NBA guy. And if he can get, somebody were to throw $1.5 million at him for 2 more years of college ball, it's $3 million, and then he goes overseas. You know what? Nowadays, that's how you make your money if you're not an NBA guy. So it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out.
No doubt. And it sounds like he'll leave with a Michigan degree too. So you can make money after that. It's not all here, but I mean, totally. And it's funny that, I feel like Kansas, I don't remember them being mentioned with his original recruitment. And now here he is, kind of looking at these different blue bloods, it felt like he was more of a, East Coast, Notre Dame, Michigan type. So it would be very fascinating to see him go there, but money talks. And, but he does have the ties here. I think we could see it. I wouldn't necessarily predict it though either.
I'll say this. If he goes in the Big Ten to Maryland, I will never pay him $25 to be on our podcast again, ever. He will not be getting the Wolverine.com's money. So there you have it.
It's about time someone put their foot down.
That's right.
Have we ever paid him $25?
No, but isn't that the going rate for these podcasts? I don't know. So
That's fair.
yeah, there you have
So
it.
yeah, Hunter Dickinson will be banned from these airwaves if he
That's
goes
right.
to Maryland.
Think
And
about that, Dickinson. All right, go
that's
ahead.
right. Something to think about.
That's right.
And I will say the Big Ten needs to schedule Maryland at Michigan if he does do that. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We'll see what comes of these visits. I feel like he did kind of downplay it a little bit on his podcast Roundball, talking about going home and everything. But at the same time, I mean, those schools are near home, and that could be a draw for him. Let's talk about one of the top guys that it seems like things are heating up with in a hurry in the transfer portal, former Tennessee forward Olivier Nkamhoua, which is how you pronounce it because I researched it, spelled Nkamhoua, a guy that was really one of the leaders of that game against Duke, scored 27 points, hit 4 threes, but a power forward who is a very good defender, very athletic. Watching his highlights, I think between him and Trey Jackson, if they were able to land Nkamhoua, you're looking at a really athletic 4 spot for Michigan, which is something that wasn't the case this past season when Terrace Reed wasn't in the game at that position. But he had 32 dunks last season. Does somebody want to wager a guess as to how many Hunter Dickinson had? I looked this up last year.
I bet he had about 6.
I was going to say 5.
He had 22. But yeah, like this is a guy that didn't play as much as Hunter, that played a different position than Hunter. Trey Jackson, I think he had 13, but that's on way less minutes, 25 over the last 2 years. I was just researching dunks earlier. It's kind of fun. And then, so you have the athleticism. He can shoot a little bit. I mentioned he made the 4 threes against Duke, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily his forte. This is a guy that would start over Trey Jackson, over Terrence Williams, all those guys at the 4. A tough defender. They were bullying Duke's big guys in that game. I watched that entire game, and it was impressive what that front line did. What are your guys' thoughts on Olivier Nkamhoua, Michigan getting in the mix here? They certainly, seems like they have identified that they have a need there still. You don't want that to be the weak point. It's an important position, and I think that they realize that.
I think that it's a very realistic option. And if you think about it, the starting 5 of Dickinson, Nkamhoua, Burnett, it's Caleb Love, and Doug McDaniel on paper, it's going to excite a lot of Michigan fans. And it's going to be, a lot of magazines are going to say that's a quintet that could probably win a lot of games in the Big Ten. Now, you don't know how it's going to mesh, and you don't know about chemistry. And you guys know me. I'm old school. I'm all about the chemistry. You look at hockey schools like Quinnipiac and what they did with their veteran team, and what you've seen from some of John Beeline's veteran teams, even though he was kind of a victim of guys leaving early too because he developed talent too well. But that was his vision, right? Guys like Eli Brooks as a 4th or 5th year guy and what they could accomplish with talent around them, being in a system for so long. You see beautiful basketball, and we saw that a lot. So to me, I think it's a very realistic option. I think that they are in a good spot with him at this point. So let's see what happens, and let's see if that moves the needle for Hunter Dickinson, right? If he sees, okay, now we've got a legit chance here, we got a legit roster, because that was one of his concerns. No matter what anybody says, do we have a roster here where we can win? Because he still wants to win. He's going to get paid, and he wants to win too. Then, to me, that could be something that they would use to bring him back as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a fit. I mean, you talk about a guy that could probably slide in and start at the 4 for you. I'll take that over, what the field would be, which is Trey Jackson, who's good, but Terrence Williams, Will Cheddar, we'll see with those guys. I think Dickinson or not, if he comes and he's playing next to Terrace Reed, I still think that's a fit too. So for me, again, I just go back to the idea that don't limit yourself just because you say, okay, well, we're at 13 guys now. I think you reiterate to your roster that there's going to be competition and that you expect this guy to compete for X job. But if that's something that you're not up for, then the portal's still open. So yeah, I mean, they're in on him. They're still in on. It looks like they're making a push for Harrison Ingram or Matthew Cleveland. I think those guys would fit the bill of those wing players that I mentioned earlier. So, yeah, I mean, it's all fit right now. And I think for I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name because I already zoned out of how Clayton did it. But Nkamhoua. If you're able to get Nkamhoua, all this without another move being made, I like how this roster looks. So we'll see what happens. Would love to see him join up because it's just they were just so bereft of talent and depth, and that's why I would hope a lot of these guys decide to stick around. Because I think someone like Terrence Williams would certainly, I think, benefit from not drinking out of the fire hose, so to speak, of playing starters minutes. We've seen that in his career already, so we'll see what happens. It's just this portal's getting crazier and crazier by the day. I mean, I'm working on another transfer portal board. Plenty of Michigan's targets are still out there to be had, but a guy who one day could be ranked your number 12. Transfer. The next day he's down 15 to 20 spots. So there are a lot of guys that are still deciding to enter the portal and not a lot of guys picking schools right now. So this it's a nice little pool of talent to pick from if you're a team like Michigan that really needs to turn this over.
No doubt. You know what I find interesting about the portal right now and the way Michigan is approaching it is I remember early on, Juwan Howard, mid of his tenure-ish, and it happened in multiple cycles. But, they were kind of shooting for the stars a lot. And guys like Harrison Ingram, guys like last cycle, Johan Traore, guys like Matthew Cleveland, as you mentioned, AB. And when they don't, you finish runner-up for a guy like Matthew Cleveland or a guy like Harrison Ingram or whatever, you're in his top three, you put all those resources into it and you don't land them, then people are like, well, we went down this road with this guy. Now we're playing catch up on other targets, that sort of thing. But now with the way the transfer portal has gone, having those relationships, and Juwan Howard is a relationships guy. I mean, he connects with these kids. He connects with just about everybody he meets, it seems like. And everybody in the basketball world knows Juwan Howard, so he can make a connection quickly. That can help now when these guys hop in the portal. It's something I did not think about when they lost out on Matthew Cleveland or Harrison Ingram or any number of these guys. Traore, didn't really feel like that was going to happen. But now those guys are on the board. So I do find that interesting. I think Harrison Ingram would be a guy that would and he's – AB, is he the one that Jamie Shaw said Michigan Vigan strong push for? So
that's correct.
If that were to happen, I think he could be a potential game changer. I will say with Ingram, with Nkamhoua, and with some of these other guys, shooting is not necessarily their strength. Like, there's not a guy on this team that's a shooter other than Caleb Love just because he loves to shoot, no pun intended. How concerned about that are you guys with this? Like, if Nkamhoua does come, I think he's a great take. He'd be a great addition, but he's not necessarily a shooter. He can shoot, but most of his points come as a post-up guy. Then you're looking at two post-up bigs, him and Terrace Reed. He's a good passer, though, Nkamhoua. But, then you're looking at playing a way that I think Juwan Howard likes to play, which is big. But I think a lot of other teams are having success right now with a four who can dribble a little bit. And really, frankly, Juwan Howard's had the most success with a guy like that in Livers. Your guys' thoughts on maybe how that would work with the construction here?
Yeah, I'm about shooters, man. That's the thing, and John Beilein spoiled us because that's all. If you couldn't shoot, he wasn't recruiting for the most part, with the exception of, Xavier Simpson and but even Charles Matthews. But he still found ways to win with some of his worst shooting teams. That team that got to the championship game, you had Xavier Simpson, you had Charles Matthews starting. These guys weren't shooters, but they still found ways. And I think if you're athletic enough, if you have just enough shooting, if these guys are in the 30s, mid-30s, if you can get them up there, then I think you can be fine as long as you defend. And that's, to me, is going to be the key for this team, is to get them to be defending like Juwan Howard has promised us his teams are going to defend, right? Like, it all starts with the defensive end. And anybody who knows me understands that this is where we need to get it done. They haven't gotten it done for a couple of years here. So to me, that's where the improvement needs to begin. So, but at the very least, it's going to be interesting, right? At one point, we thought this is a train wreck, and we said, I wrote a column about a week ago, and I said, let's not give up hope yet, man, with the transfer portal and how quickly things can change. Let's just see what the roster is going to look like. And we still don't know, but we do know that there are potentially a lot more pieces than we thought we were going to see in Ann Arbor. And it's very intriguing, to say the least.
Yeah, part of it too for me is, we talk about the value of, why were those first two Juwan Howard? Well, the first team I think kind of outperformed expectations, but that second team, took things to the next level, competed for a national title because it had a lot of guys on the roster that had played a lot of college basketball before. So that's where I think kind of the silver lining of having to dip into the transfer portal is, like, a guy like Harrison Ingram, hasn't played a lot of winning basketball and wants to win somewhere and has seen a lot of games. So, a guy like that coming over from a Stanford makes a lot of sense to me. I think that you're just looking for guys that, they have the experience, shot making. Listen, I mean, it's hard to find those guys. It's getting better and better, but when you parse through the options in the portal that Michigan are in on, no one's really shooting 40% from three or anything like that. But I do, again, to go back to Clay's original question, would you rather have the two bigs or play a little bit smaller? I would like to see a guy, if given the choice between a couple options, I would like to see a guy who can maybe play the 3 and the 4 as opposed to the 4 and the 5. So, yeah, I feel like I keep saying we'll see what happens. But again, it's just it almost feels like a futile exercise to speculate about what could happen because things change. Things have been changing so quickly in terms of, team type and archetype. You just got to get good players in and develop an identity from there. And to me, that's the biggest thing right now. So that's the task ahead of them.
One guy in the portal that they're after is shooting 42% from 3. Who's that? Clay?
Is that AJ Storr?
It's Hunter Dickinson.
Oh, Hunter Dickinson. Yeah.
So, all right.
What, 57 attempts or something?
Hey, you know what? Maybe you should have taken some more. Who knows?
But yeah, I mean, think of it though. I mean, and those are big shots a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And he's hit some big threes in his career, including against Nkamhoua in Tennessee. Nkamhoua was hurt, but the year before when he started out the game with those 2 threes.
Yeah.
So what, 25 made threes or something like that for Hunter this past year? It's probably going to be 0 for Terrace Reed if he's the starting 5. Like that's not a small thing. I mean, you play a different way, but shooting's important, and Michigan got that out of its center the last couple of years. More so last year than it did the year before, and that was big for this team. I mean, they didn't go anywhere, but it still helped them. So yeah, that's kind of where things stand. As AB mentioned, that could change in 2 minutes, and we'll see what happens. Is a great way to put it.
Because literally, we've been on this podcast when things have happened by the end of it. It's crazy.
Clay and I did one, what was it, 2 weeks ago, where we had to stop and re-record
for Namari Burnett.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and Juwan, we forget this too. I'm about to put out, the updated transfer board, but a lot of times Juwan Howard operates in silence. Like Namari Burnett was a name that kind of came out of nowhere. Trey Jackson was a name that kind of came out of nowhere. So there might be someone we're not even really talking about that's on 100%. Their radar right now. And that's how they've landed guys in the past. Yo-Yo was, no one knew they were in on him until you see a picture of Juwan on a bike in France. And what's he doing over there? So,
to be fair, we did hint to it before we saw that picture, and we're like, okay, we'd heard that they were after him. But, and who knows, you know what, he could come out of nowhere and show great improvement and be a factor on next year's team. People write these guys off. Everybody's ready to get rid of Will Cheddar. I've seen growth in guys like him, by their 3rd or 4th years where they become valuable pieces. I'm not saying that's, his role, but he's better than he's shown, especially as a shooter, in my opinion. So let's not bail on all these guys just yet.
Yeah, that was another, one last point, just piggybacking off that. That's the other thing is a guy like Namari Burnett hasn't shot well from 3, but you saw guys like a guy like Kobe Buffkin this year, who all the numbers went up just by the consistency and playing more. So, guys, that's where, for every, Terrence Williams there is, where they play more and the efficiency kind of goes down, you have a guy like Kobe Buffkin. So we'll see what happens with a guy like Burnett. And there's going to be internal improvement that happens with guys on this roster. So even if this roster comes together and it's not, he's 40% from 3, or, he can do this, he can do that. You got to look to the guys that are there already there as well. So,
no, you bring up a great point. Something I wanted to bring up to wrap up our basketball talk, AB, is, and Namari Burnett's a decent example of this. So he has 3 years of eligibility left. Even if he's not some great guy with the ball in his hands, let's say he doesn't shoot 40% from three this season. Maybe he gets a little bit better. You're probably going to see him come back another year and improve on that. And maybe the light switch, goes off that season. But there's also a flip side of this when you look at guys like Caleb Love. He has 2 years left, but he has said he intends on just using one. Trey Jackson, 1 year left. Nkamhoua, I would think you would get for 1 year. I think he might only have 1 year of eligibility left, maybe two. And some of these other guys, is this a sustainable method where every year you got to do this? Now, at the same time, and I was thinking about this earlier, you don't know necessarily, though, that all these guys are going to leave at the end here after the season. So you just don't know. And then you try to plug the holes because sometimes, you can't add a ton of guys in the recruiting class if you don't know who's going to be here or not. And I think that's what's so frustrating for these coaches right now. But your guys' thoughts on just the way that it seems like there are a lot of one-year guys here. This is really an important year for Juwan Howard in Michigan. There's a lot of pressure. I understand it. But, next year, I think they might be back in the same spot, adding a bunch of guys. Or maybe they have a huge recruiting class, because in advance, I guess. But is this a sustainable method?
Well, you've got George Washington the third coming in. You've got Doug McDaniel, who should be a 4-year guy. But the main thing here is you've got to continue to recruit your own guys, too, to stay now with the portal. You look at Doug. You know what? If he blows up this year, he's going to be a hot commodity. And say there's a team out there like a Kansas or something that says, point guard is the only thing we need to complete our roster, and they go after him and throw $1.5 million.
And Hunter starts recruiting him.
Exactly. I don't even want to think about it. But this is the reality of college athletics now. You can call us, living in the past or whatever. I think it sucks. I hate it. You know what? There was something special about college athletics when guys, and I talked to those guys who played back then, and a lot of them wouldn't change anything. They said, I played for the love of the school. I played because I knew I was going to get an opportunity to be seen and go to the NFL. And they said, I didn't need $1 million. Doug Skeen would be one of them who played in the NFL, Granted, backgrounds matter too, right? Some guys come from better backgrounds than others, and there are families that need money more than others. But to me, the whole thing it's basically professional ball now. And it is what it is. So finding that balance like Michigan football has faster than I thought they would, frankly, is going to be key, where you have to recruit your guys, create a culture where they want to stay, win titles helps, right? And then go to the portal for your needs. You don't want to be that program that's going to the portal every year and put 5 new guys because you never know how they're going to mesh. And it's complicated. You know what? Juwan Howard runs some pretty complicated, good stuff. And the longer you're together to run it, the better you're going to be. If you have to teach that every year like that, to me, you know what? It's going to be a crapshoot year after year.
I think the key, too, is that if you win at a place like Michigan, I don't know that other schools are poaching you. Or, I mean, I guess it could happen if you're a guy that's just looking for the NIL bag. But I suspect that, all of the reasons that people have speculated why Hunter Dickinson went in the transfer portal are probably accurate. It's probably a mixture of everything, NIL, roster, it is all that stuff. The fact of the matter is that he is a former All-American on a team that went 18-16 this year. So it's incumbent upon, I think this is kind of goes to Chris's point about retaining your own guys and having that trust in the coaching staff that there's going to be a good roster around you. You have to win, and winning does, as we've seen, winning does a lot to help you retain top talent. It kind of makes your program the place to be. And it wasn't not all that long ago where, there were all kinds of blue chip recruits that, would probably knock down the door to come play for Juwan Howard because that team was having fun when they won and they embraced, kind of their role as the big bad Michigan villain. And this team needs to get back to that identity. It's this offseason is a reset for them. Maybe not quite to the extent of the post-COVID reset for the football program, but they need guys that burn to win, and they need to get back to winning. And I think that's going to solve a lot of their problems here. Also, the fact of the matter is that with the way the transfer portal is now, I don't know, are you going to take a guy who's ranked number 150 in a recruiting class, or are you going to save that spot for someone in the portal to backfill a need for at least a year or two. So it changes the dynamics of roster building. And I'm really interested, especially now that recruiting has kind of gone just a bit down for Michigan under Juwan Howard. I wonder if that philosophy will change at all. I guess we won't see until, this 24 class coming up. But you don't want to have to flip your roster over every year. I mean, that's what Nebraska has to do. That's what, it worked out for Penn State this year, but that's not I don't think that's a sustainable model. So I'm going to be really interested into seeing, one, if they can get this thing back on track, and two, how the the scholarship allotment when it comes to the recruiting trail starts to work itself out.
Yeah, and AB, the guys that aren't breaking down the door to play for Juwan Howard, maybe they will be in a couple of years, like Namari Burnett and some of these other guys that they're back in on. So it creates an interesting dynamic for sure, and we'll see. I mean, you're right. I don't think we're going to know how Juwan Howard feels about his long-term philosophy until after this, because right now he's got to build a competitive roster. And I think he's done a good job so far of doing that. Last thing, Michigan athletics has 3. It's just pretty crazy. I don't know how many winter sports there are. Maybe I should have looked it up, but maybe like 10, 11, 8, 9. Michigan has 3 national athletes of the year in their respective sports. Adam Fantilli for hockey, Mason Paris for wrestling, and Sierra Brooks now for women's gymnastics wins the quote-unquote Heisman Trophy of women's gymnastics. I'd like to see if it's ever happened at Michigan or in the Big Ten or anywhere else. Pretty impressive stuff. And I know, you want to win the national title if you're Michigan hockey. I think gymnastics can still do so. You want to win the national title in all these, but you're looking at, just some elite talent that Michigan has had in one season, I think is super impressive.
It really is, and that's why they're always up there in what used to be the Sears Cup. What is it now? The
Learfield Director Cup.
Yeah, and just amazing. But you know what? It's been that way for a long time. I would imagine if it happened anywhere else, it'd be Stanford, right, with their 82 sports or whatever. And
they're good at all the Olympic stuff.
Right, exactly. So, but it is impressive, and it's a destination. And people ripped on Dave Brandon for a lot of the things he did as athletic director, but he made sure that the Olympic sports were well taken care of as well. So the foundation is and has been there, and congratulations to Ward Manuel as well, the athletic director, for keeping that going. 13, I think, Big Ten champions this year, if I'm not mistaken. And so and you look at probably more than that now. You look at hockey, and it's pretty impressive where this thing is.
Yeah, credit where credit's due. I think that Ward Manuel catches a lot of heat. Some of it justified, others not so much. But the one thing you can't argue is that with these Olympic sports, in addition to the big sports, you are competing for Big Ten championships in almost every single one, and you have nationally recognized players in every single one, and that speaks to, I think, the strength of the athletic department. It speaks to hiring and putting the right people in place. And, they've had an issue with keeping some of them when contract stuff has come up. Need to get a little bit better on that front. But the platform that this university gives its Olympic sports players or student athletes, whatever you want to call them, is amazing. I feel like every month when we go sit down and do the magazine, I'm writing about some kind of massive, last month it was the Hodge Trophy. This month, Sierra Brooks, and you got, Adam Fantilli and the Hobie Baker, and Blake Corum would have been a Heisman Trophy finalist, and all these laundry list of accolades. It's just hats off to Michigan. It is, as good, pound for pound, as good as any athletic department in the country for whatever my money's worth.
Yeah, I think Bev Plotke is in her 34th season as head coach of the women's gymnastics team. Apparently, she's set to interview in a couple of days with such and such team. I'm just kidding, but Ward, extender Ward, give her a raise. But,
wow, you scared me. I was like, wow, really? That's crazy.
No, yeah.
Carol, next thing you know, Carol Hutchins is going to be coming out of retirement and interviewing at Michigan State, right?
Right. We'd have to start covering that.
Yeah.
So, no, there you go. Congrats to Sierra Brooks, who got it announced, but Fantilli, last week, and Mason Paris we've known about for a little while, and he was a star of the show, AB, at that pep rally we were at lot of people asking for his. There's like a niche crew of wrestling fans that love watching Michigan, and he was getting a lot of love, and rightfully so. So we wish all those athletes our congratulations. That is going to be our show for today. Make sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button on our channel and head to the Wolverine.com. All of the latest. We said things are going to keep changing with that transfer portal. We'll keep you up to date over at the Wolverine.com. $29.99 gets you premium access all the way through August 31st. So every day that goes by, that deal gets a little bit worse. So take advantage right now, and we will see you next time.